Good morning. Welcome to the first meeting of the Policy Committee meeting of the 2025-2026 school year. Prior to starting the meeting, I would like to read something that I put together and to get us to all on the same page and understand our purpose here, what we're here to do, and what we're here to accomplish. So, the primary purpose of our school board's policy committee is to review, recommend, evaluate the effectiveness of district policies. The committee will ensure these policies align with current laws, address the district's needs, and support student achievement. Acting as an essential intermediary, the committee will prepare policy proposals for review and potential adoption by the full board, thereby playing a vital role in the overall governance process. The committee will review existing policies and consider proposed changes as suggested by our affiliation with the New York State School Boards Association. This approach will ensure that all policies are up to date, relevant, and aligned with our board's goals and legal requirements. The committee's recommendations will then be presented to the entire board for action. Additionally, the committee will draft new policies and revise existing ones, involving stakeholder input and considering best practices. Suggestions from our valued stakeholders can be emailed to our board clerk, who will ensure the information is forwarded to the board policy committee. Another valued role of this committee will be to ensure that the district adheres to state and federal mandates. As chair of the 25-26 Policy Committee, I am excited to work with my colleagues, co-chair Ray Bergarelli and Sade Burks, as we focus on the work of doing our part to get our scholars across the academy field. Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to our acting superintendent, Onyx Peterson, for agenda item 1.01.
So prior to doing that, because the clerk, everyone is hopefully enjoying summer vacation and different time away, we have to, as a board, if you guys can appoint a clerk pro tem.
Okay, Chair will entertain a motion to appoint a clerk pro tem.
Second.
Margot May as clerk pro tem. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So approved.
Okay, so the first policy, I'm going to ask the committee, because Mr. McGrath is in transit, if we can go to 1.2 and then come back.
Yes.
So the next policy is public comment at board meetings. I know the committee and the board had some concerns. I don't know if there's questions that you have regarding the changes or anything that you guys would like to discuss.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Howard. Reading over it looks good. The one question I had is, and this isn't a request as much as it is just a question and how people feel about it. There was always expressed a desire to allow people to be able to speak at the end of the meeting when, the business of the meeting goes on, and there may be some controversy or, the public may not agree or have questions about. While I agree that we should have agenda and non-agenda speaking in the beginning of the meeting, as been customarily done here, should we think about a short session, a shorter 2 to 3 minute speaking at the end for the people that do stay? I'm not married to it either way. I'm just throwing it out there that what does the committee think about that?
Mr. President.
I'm not opposed to it. We would have to probably reintroduce another policy, but if we had 15 minutes at the end of the meeting, right before adjournment, if people want to speak, no opposition to that. We could develop that.
Okay, and me personally, I tend to agree with Mr. Bergarelli. If it's a shorter time length, maybe 2 to 3 minutes, as he said, because over the course of the meetings, over the years, I've had people come to me and say that, they really wanted to speak to something that came up on the agenda.
15 minutes period after?
Yes, 10 to 15 minutes. And I think that would give people the public an opportunity to immediately address some of the concerns that may have been brought up at the meeting. So that's something that I think that we can discuss. Or is it possible to add that to make an addition to this resolution?
You can choose to add it if you want to present it to the board with your recommendation. if you want, I will add language regarding an additional.
Please do, so that when we bring it forward at the next meeting, it will be a part of it. Thank you.
And that would only be on non-agenda items? You've already completed the agenda?
Yes, on agenda items, yes.
Ms. Sade Burks just stepped in, maybe she wants to comment.
Ms. Burks, would you like to comment on 1.02?
Is that the public comments after? I would vote yes for it because as a previous community member sitting in the audience, sometimes when you guys discuss things, we have more questions after, and by the time the next meeting comes, we've forgotten the questions if we didn't write them down, so I would think that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Ms. Peterson?
I just have a question for clarification, because Mrs. may need this. I know that you guys said, just so that when she's editing it, 15-minute section for that. Is there a time limit on that section? I think that that's something people may want to know.
A total of 15 minutes, 2 minutes per person. Did you say 2 or 3? 2.
Yeah, I can agree with that. 2 minutes per person, a 15-minute total session.
Actually, 16 minutes. I don't want somebody to be cut short.
Okay. So the next policy that you guys have up for review is the anti-discrimination and harassment policy. And there was portions of this during the general management of the district and certain situations that came up. You know, there's definitely a management piece that we need to look at, and Mrs. May has further details on that.
It has, what I know, and I really didn't realize this was going to be on, was that this policy has caused a great deal of grievances by individuals that really, oh, sorry. That it has had consequences that are other than what was intended by this policy, that it has become so broad that it has caused a flurry of complaints against individuals in the district. So because it has been used in a way that has made it untenable, that has given a huge amount of additional work to the human resources staff, it was suggested that this be either totally omitted from the policy book or revised.
Ms. Peterson, how stands central office on this recommendation?
I think that there's a lot of things, there's a lot of protections and different things that have occurred. I definitely think that there's portions of this policy that, under New York State law and employment law, there are different things that employees do have rights for, right? They have rights under grievances and statutes. I think that in terms of, there's also protections in a process within every bargaining unit agreement and every contract that talk about grievances and complaints and how those should be taken forward. So this is an additional layer that in certain situations that we have gotten through, and, you know, we could definitely come back that the legal, and this may be an executive conversation. I'm actually thinking this is an executive conversation.
And there is another policy, anti-harassment policy for employees in the 9,000s, I believe.
So it's a policy layered on top of a policy that is giving us management, but I think it's we need to have an executive conversation about it.
Okay, so we will have this conversation, executive session of our next meeting, and also an opportunity for all board members to chime in on this. Any other board members on the board right now, on this dais right now, want to speak towards that, please do. Mr. Bergarelli.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. You already said it a couple times, but I just want to really make sure that, us considering removing this policy, we do have other policies already in this district that provide the protections that was intended generally by this policy. So we wouldn't be, taking anyone's rights by
Correct.
this conversation or considering this action.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Burks, any comments?
Mr. Buglarelli kind of said everything. Thank you.
Mr. President, any comments? Ms. Peterson?
I just also want to say that sometimes in policy development, this is why it's important for us to have a clear understanding, because sometimes new policies are mandated by the state, and then they layer on top of old policies. So we have an anti-harassment policy, different things, and if this still stands, it's like we sometimes have conflicting. So that's why policy work is very, very important, that we're looking at our whole entire policy manual and cross-referencing those things.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Ms. Burks?
Will eliminating this policy have anything to do with the DASSA Act also?
No.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. 1.04, Ms. Peterson?
So a couple of policy meetings back, there was a conversation about the board at that time wanted to have some clarifications, and they wanted to have some parameters around some of the expectation for our coaches. And this is a proposed policy that I researched and kind of thought about some of the operational and managerial things that we are experiencing, and to have those rules well defined. I know that that's something that the board has asked the management team. So in working with legal with the review, this is a proposed policy around just creating the definitions of what the requirements for coaches are. This would also, on top of this policy, it would solidify it also with a regulation in terms of this is what the board would like to see from coaches, and then this is what management will require from coaches as well.
Board members, any questions? Mr. Burgarelli?
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Ms. Peterson, how does this affect or change, or are we looking to change? We currently have a player and a coach's handbook that go out, I think every season. So how is this reflected in that, or this is going to lead to some changes with that, or how are they married together?
I think it's just an understanding, because there was a lot of questions in recent situations regarding how is our athletic department run, what are the responsibilities, and then as board members, I think that there's a governance structure that this is what we want to see. This is what we want to see from management around our athletic department. This is what we want to see from our coaches that are employed with us. So just to kind of go through the policy, what the purpose is what you guys you want to see from our coaches, the definition of what each coach is and those responsibilities. The qualifications, which are a part of what we already follow, licensing qualifications. I think it was important also to make sure that we adhere, and stating it in plain language, that from the board, the expectation is that the coach follow the code of conduct and 5411. I know that there has been a lot of policy work in 5411 in making sure that students qualify academically, behaviorally, for participation in extracurricular activities and athletics and ethic, and also to make sure that they maintain up-to-date knowledge of all the rules and regulations associated with their sport, Section 9 rules in New York State NISFA rules. I think it's also important that you guys, we better define, which is also defined within our athletic coaches handbook, while being the enforcement of academic policies. I know that that was a big part of some coaches' discussions in the past. Evaluation and accountability, that it is your expectation as a board that coaches are evaluated and that is submitted. Professional development, how are we fostering a an ongoing professional development for our coaches and providing them the opportunity to have relevant development, and just code of conduct in general, and then the compliance and review. So many of these topics are outlined in the coach's handbook, and as a part of the regulation, that would be something that would be submitted, and also really clearly defined for our entire community when, what does a coach need to be appointed? What would be the expectations regarding the definition of their employment? What is the expectation when you are managing a team? What is your expectation around evaluation, and how that compliance and review would go from the leadership perspective? So it kind of outlines what those expectations would be.
Thank you. Any questions, board members? Mr. Bergarelli?
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Just, but browsing through it, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see anywhere where it directly speaks to the handbook saying, as, referring back to those handbooks, so they sort of check each other, or the handbook is a document, and this is the parent document, or something like that. Maybe you understand what I'm saying, maybe.
Right, so I think that, so this would be the broad policy. There would be a regulation where I would outline for the board regarding, the expectation for orientation of coaches, the policy of that. I think it may be important to put the coach's handbook in it, that there's an annual receipt of the coach's handbooks. That could strengthen it, that could be a recommendation, I can put that in there. And that would be under the responsibilities, or in the professional development section. We could definitely add that, because it would strengthen it. Because it just says, the district may require attendance in coaching clinics, workshops, or certification renewal courses, in terms of professional development annually. If you're appointed, it's your responsibility to obtain or receive the coach's annual handbook. I think that might be a good addition.
Ms. May?
We might also want to say that there's nothing in this policy that would limit the additional provisions in the coach's handbook, because there are many more provisions in there than there would be in the broad policy.
Okay, so I guess my question would be, is this a new layer, or is this something that coincides with the coach's handbook, or is this something that is an additional item that gives more oversight to the board as per a policy? And if so, is everything here aligned with the CBA of the employees?
Everything is aligned with the bargaining agreement. What this is this is just clarity, because I know that there was a lot of questions from the board on how we govern our coaches. And I think that this would bring a little bit of clarity in terms of the requirements. Like it is New York State law that everyone is qualified. Our definition of what each level of coaching is, what the requirements for a volunteer coach are, what you believe the responsibility upon the acceptance of a position of a coach as a board member. I do think that it's important to also talk about the expectation, evaluation, and professional development, and just the compliance and review from the management staff around coaches in general. I think it's another layer, but it is in alignment with the coach's handbook.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, board members?
Just one
Mr.
comment.
DeRay?
I like it. It's more like an umbrella policy that encompasses the policies beneath it. But it's for us as the board, and it's pretty simply laid out. So I like moving it forward.
Thank you. Ms. May?
I just want to go back to the public comment policy. Is that going on for a first reading and adoption, or just a first reading at the next meeting?
First reading and adoption.
Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. McGrath has made his way through he traversed. Sometimes construction in the summertime is tough. So if we could go back to 1.01. So we reviewed this policy within our policy committee, and it has been up to board for first read. As a part of the policy, I know that we had public comment and as well as some concerns internally that were brought up, that we needed to have a shareholder group around this policy because this greatly impacts the day-to-day operation of the building. It's an instructional piece. It's a piece where when everyone is not always abiding in what the policy or what the rules and regulation are, what's from the student end. I think there's also a lot of concerns when it comes to the expansion of this law by Governor Hochul in terms of what this really means, right? So before, we have our Yonder pouches, we have our Chromebooks that we have students every day have in their possession and carry around. But this distraction-free schools kind of expands it even further, and it talks about just any electronic device. So Mr. McGrath held a stakeholder meeting where he's going to give us some of the details and recommendations for the board for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. McGrath. Before you start, the stakeholder group, not necessarily who, but can you tell me the people that were invited? What stakeholders were invited and part of this committee, please?
Sure. So we invited stakeholders from the different bargaining units to make sure that we had different employee input into it as required by law. We also had some conversations with some parents and tried to field. An understanding of their concerns. And then one of the overriding things you'll hear me talk about this is the need to balance this law with other existing laws in New York State, including data privacy laws. Okay, so the committee generally looked at this, and the idea of distraction-free schools is really important. But we also need to be mindful of the fact that our students also need to be able to communicate with home, with their families. So there are a number of ways that families communicate with the district throughout the district, including different systems that we have. For emergency purposes, the law requires us to set up a system, and so our system in this policy talks to the fact that the parents can call the main office in an emergency. Now, there's multiple other ways for them to communicate with the district, but we wanted voice because we wanted to know in an emergency somebody picked up the phone and the parent hears and knows that they've been heard and that message has been delivered. Again, it's for emergency purposes only. Other methods of communication already exist. The other piece that was really important to us is at the end of the academic day, we wanted the students to be able to communicate home to the families and not be subject to this. So for example, if the families are, it's the end of the 8th period, students getting ready to go home, they haven't gotten on the bus yet, or they haven't gotten in the cars yet, they haven't done anything yet. We wanted to create a window where the student could then get on their phone, communicate with mom and dad or their guardians and say, hey, this is what's happening, and have a window for them to do that. They would still be in compliance with the law, but also allow for normal day-to-day operation. So that was really important. And so in the policy, the recommended changes, it includes things like it does not extend beyond the academic school day. So that is if there's a club and they want to use the devices, or if there's a field trip, or if they're going on sports events and they want to use them on the buses, or even just the bus going home, that would all still be allowable under this policy. Again, we're trying to balance the law, the idea of distraction-free students, but also just normal pragmatic needs. One of the other things that we talked about is what would be considered an applicable storage device. So within the district, right now, backpack, purses, and other personal items without additional restrictive pouches would not be allowed. So we didn't want to create a policy that would create where a student says, hey, I don't need a Yonder pouch because I put it in my backpack. Because right now, they can do that, but they have to also use a Yonder pouch. So this policy would allow them to do that. And again, we're looking at pragmatic things. We also looked very closely at what exceptions would be, right? So for example, if there's a medical exception, there's an availability for that. If a student has a 504 or an IEP, they are allowed to use devices in conjunction with those documents. If there is an emergency, school administrator still has the ability to say, okay, normally we would let you use this phone, but because of this specific situation, and you can't predict every situation, so we needed to build some flexibility in, the administrator would be able to say, okay, you can use your phone under this specific emergency situation, not as a day-to-day, but as a one-time kind of off. So we put that into the policy. We looked at things like translation services. And translation services were really difficult because on one end, we absolutely want to make sure that our students can use translation services, but we also have the data privacy law at Law 2D. And that, The problem with translation services that the district doesn't control or own is that those companies do not sign data privacy. So those devices are always listening. So anything that anybody says would then be broadcast out to those companies without a data privacy agreement. So if a student is wearing a device and there's no data privacy agreement and PII, personally identifiable information, is shared, that information would then go into the cloud and be out there, and the other students and that student would have no protections of their privacy. And that's a big concern because we need to make sure that we protect everybody's data privacy. So for that reason, we took out the piece about allowing translation services for E&L services that were not under district control, because we need to be able to protect the student's privacy. And that was one we kind of went back and forth on, because we do see a need, and those technologies are emerging, and I would like to see us look into finding data privacy translation devices that are kind of wearables. I think this is where the technology is going. So our policy would allow us to do that as a district, again, under district control, so that we can make sure that data privacy rules are followed. Other things, I'm sorry, I'm going, yeah, questions, yeah.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
Do the Chromebooks allow students to have translation ability on them?
They do.
Then this probably won't be an important provision as long as they have access to translation services. And through the Chromebook, they would be supervised by the district.
Correct, and also there's a data privacy agreement around those
Yes.
translation services.
But I also think this was something, because, and I know the committee, I didn't have to be there, Mr. McGrath, to know that the committee struggled on this, because there have been many requests from teachers and from the school communities in general to have translation services. The data privacy is definitely a concern with translation. They will not sign them, but I think it's important for us as a district to explore, as Mr. McGrath said, what can be used, how it can be used, and how is it in compliance. I definitely think ed law and making sure that we protect PII was an important consideration with this, and it's definitely, I know that there have been other districts that piloted programs for this same thing. We do have translation services that we use in terms of language line if we have an official meeting. We've also expanded some translation services within buildings, because we know that our population and our community needs those translation services. But, you know, we still will explore the use of that that comes into compliance with Ed Law 2D.
And that is certainly an emerging technology, right? The translation services are increasingly getting improved upon, but the data privacy was sort of that balance that we had to walk. I think that covers the majority of the changes that were recommended. Some of them were, it was interesting the committee picked up on the fact that non-data technologies could also be, so one of the recommendations was also to include cellular devices, right? Old school cellular devices, because we were trying to find out if we're trying to provide a distraction-free environment, we don't want to create a loophole that someone can say, oh, well, if I use this older technology, I can get around it. So we included that as well. And I think that kind of summarizes the big changes that the committee
Mr.
recommended.
McGrath,
Yeah.
were any students a part of this committee?
Students were not part of this committee, no.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Peterson?
What I can say is, when we did the Yonder implementation at the high school and the middle school levels this year, so there's a part that some of our secondary students are especially familiar with, because they've already been practicing using ponder pouches as a part of their daily. What I'm most concerned on, and things that I am trying to also make sure that our buildings make aware of for our students in the fall, is that we need to have another conversation with students around that, because we're changing it again, you know, for them in terms of what it means. I think that we've allowed the ability in certain instances in their lunch and other times where they were allowed, and that's not allowed anymore. So I think that that's going to be something that we need to definitely review with the community and students come the fall.
But you also have to emphasize that you're required to change the policy because the law changed.
Right.
It wasn't a decision of the school district independently.
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple things. The one thing was, you know, with now us having students part of the board, did not have them in the discussion of, you know, the development of this process. You know, we probably should have. No state, but we're still writing this policy, though, you know, so just their input. But I do have a couple questions. One of them may not be appropriate for this matter, but when it was discussed about emergency contacts or emergencies when a student needs to use electronic device, you said the word administrators a couple times, Mr. McGrath. Is that like, so we wouldn't let a teacher or a coach make that decision? It has to be an administrator, or there is some flexibility with that?
Okay, so a coach would be an after-school, so it would be outside the academic day, so coaches could, and students could use their devices as needed.
Yes, you're right.
For during the academic day, it is limited to administrators, and the reason for that is because if the student has a use other than day-to-day, if there's an emergency, an administrator should know about that and should, if under the general care of the student. So if something rises to that level, we do want our administrators to be there to make sure that our students get whatever the emergency is, that they're aware of it and they can support our students.
Thank you. And the other question I had is, and it may not actually pertain to this, but when it comes to communication with a student, a parent or guardian or caretaker trying to communicate with their student in the school, I've personally had the experience to where I call the school, I have to tell my kid that they're taking the bus today rather than me picking them up or vice versa. And I know this doesn't specifically address this, but the policy in which the student is notified. I've had it where I call the office, they get hold of the student has to come all the way down to the office just to get a, hey, take the bus today message. I know it's not totally part of this, but it just seems like, number one, it's a waste of school time when it's just a simple, you know, message. Like I said, I know it's not a part of this, or could it be a part of this, or is there another policy, or that's left to the principal's discretion, how they want to run their school, or?
I think that we definitely need to, that there's going to be a management piece to this policy. And that's the management piece. So is that time 5 minutes before the bell where people come down so we're not interrupting instructional time? If it's true emergency, students will be pulled and brought to the main office. So I do think that there's going to be definitely some management things, because I know that we have communication has happened so regularly. Sometimes it's a quick message, but you need to know that your child knows. I need you to know where I put the key. You know, I need you to know that my expectation when you get home is X, Y, Z. It's a part of parenting. And it is definitely going to be something where we're going to have conversations with our main office staff with that follow-up and follow-through. And it's something that the building level leaders are going to have to figure out how to manage based on this law, because it's definitely something that we have to abide by. It could be as simple as, we're not going to let you use the classroom. I have a quick message, and letting teachers know if I have a quick message for a child from a parent, perhaps I'm asking the student to come to the phone if it's something in private. So I think that those parameters, building level leadership is going to have to work out with their staff, and we should be discussing, this will be some of the administration and management of this is going to be something that we're going to have to discuss as we begin the new year, the new school year. I just also want to have, for a point of clarification, Mr. Graff, I just want to make sure that we're clear. So on the list of communication during the school day, I have principal, assistant principal, guidance counselor, school psychologist, school social worker, and school nurse. Is it just going to be, or are these, because I think that student support, you know, I'm a big student support fan, is definitely, like if I'm in a room, sometimes parents need to be called if you're in any of these offices.
So this is, this policy specifically speaks to who the parents should reach out to.
Okay.
So if anybody in the school has a need to reach out to the parent, they can do that anytime during the day. This policy doesn't speak to that. That doesn't change. Additionally, and I think the end of the day message for those students, right? That's such an important piece that you raised, and which is why we were so clear to say at the end of the academic day, students go check your phone, see if there's any messages, take this bus home or go here or whatever the message is. So that would be another avenue the parents could have in addition to reaching out to the main office or to the school.
I think at the, I'm sorry.
Ms. Burks?
Mr. McGrath, I appreciate the fact that at the end of the day, you guys do allow the kids to go and check, but I would, just to say, throw special education in there, because my son is a special education student and he doesn't have a phone, but I'm thinking about getting him one. Because he is the type of kid, checking at the end of the day won't work for him. Anxiety runs with ADHD, autism, and all of those other diagnoses. So having my son wait till the end of the day, normally, he's telling me in the morning, text my teacher and tell her that you're coming to pick me up. If I don't text her, they're calling my job at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm having to leave from small group. So that's not gonna work for special education kids who are on the spectrum.
So you are 100% correct, and one size does not fit all, which is why we have IEPs and we have 504s. And if that's a need during that meeting, you'll want that included in the IEP.
Ms. Peterson?
I think what's also important to note is that this is one of those things, or one of the areas that we're gonna have to review with administration. So in a secondary building, I think that would be important, and this is already happening in many of our secondary buildings. There's like the student phone, in the main office, and there's a check and a permission to ask. But I do think that that's a part of the process where with students that have those needs, building level leaders and the teachers should be aware to support that child to make sure that if that is a question or concern, that we're using their IEP as a guide to help de-escalate them, calm them, and then support them in those moments. That's a part of what the individual education plan is for. It's for us to be aware of how to manage and care for a student that may be in that situation. I do think that we're going to see throughout the state, because, a law is always good until it's executed. So we're going to see that execution very shortly across the state. And, as a board, if there are concerns that we're seeing with the management and there's things within the law and parameters that we need to clarify from the management perspective, we will bring that to the board's attention.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson.
Can I
And
say
Ms.
something?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. It's very important that students and parents in each building know exactly when the time that that the instructional day starts and the instructional day ends. Because it's not a universal, each building has a different schedule.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So I had a few questions. So I think it's very important what Margot said earlier in regards to this being a governor's ruling. And also what Ms. Peterson said, what I gathered her saying, that this is basically going to be a living document. So how do we, number one, ensure that the community understands that this is not a Newburgh School District policy, but it was something that came down from the governor's office, and we're trying to make compliance with this ruling, but also with compliance and understanding that it is a living document. This question, I guess, is for Ms. Peterson. How are we geared to go forward with it? And this does start the first day of the school year, correct?
August 1, hopefully after the approval of this. I think the governance ruling is important, and perhaps that can be communicated in our welcome letter, and it's also something that we can put in our registration department. So when we have new students coming in, that we're all kind of given this is a distraction-free school and what that means. It's kind of similar to what we did when we introduced the Yonder pouches to our middle and high school students and families, where we kind of gave the parameters, we gave the why, we explained to them what that would mean, and we gave them avenues by which they could still communicate with their child. And administration is going to take that same approach with this board policy. I think that it's also important to note that it's also something that we can put in our calendar. So every family gets a calendar so that explanation is in there this year, and how that will change and how that will make sure that they're well notified.
I think something of this magnitude is we're better doing more than less. Mr. DeRay, then Mr. Bergarelli.
Thank you. On the communication, I think that's going to be something, we have about 5 weeks left, and I think really it should be a communications campaign, because what I envision is on the first day of school, instead of a lot of learning going on, we're going to have a lot of chaos going on. And we have multiple media ways to communicate, and I think we could take this policy and make it some sort of executive summary, even if we have to take out an ad in the paper, and the ad begins with New York State law requires the Newburgh Central or Newburgh City School District to abide by the following. Please make sure you're aware. I really think we need a campaign here, because I understand what you're saying, put it in a calendar, put it in a welcome letter, but I would suggest that people with a welcome letter by the time their child's in 8th grade may not be reading the welcoming letter. They've seen it before and they don't realize the change. This is a very radical change. And it's not as severe for our district because we've been practicing it somewhat for a couple of years. But I think we have a chance here to spend a little bit of money, but to do some great communications. Also, to the point when we're getting those phone calls on the first day, I didn't know. We're able to say, hey, we posted it here. It was on all these different media outlets. Let me send you something. So I think we need to do a good job communicating. Thank you.
Ms. Peterson and Ms. Bergerelli.
I think that I definitely agree. Once the board adopts the policy, that would kind of be the launch to that. Like the board adopted a New York State mandated law regarding internet. And I think that it's important for people to understand this is what will change and this is what will not change. So that's definitely a good pathway forward for us in the communication area of how we're formulating this kind of push out to the community.
I also do want to add, and it's important that the board is really aware that one of the big changes here that may not be completely visible on surface glance is that our bring your own device program now needs to be revisited because that is now no longer permitted. Right? So it's important that we know that we will be providing a device for every student, but the ability for students to bring in their own devices is no longer allowed.
Margot?
You said, we talked about the translation services. I think maybe the bullet should say for district-approved translation services. Under it's the top of page 2. It's the third bullet, because it says for translation services, if required by ENL students. If we're gonna, and that's what the law says, that's permitted. But if we're going to do that, it should say for district-approved translation services. And you may not have an issue because of the fact that they can do it through the Chromebook, but I just want to make sure that
So the concern with that, right, was that a district-approved translation service, right, could say this student is entitled to a translation service. I completely agree with that. The issue is the venue by which they get that service, that we need control over that for data privacy reasons.
that's what a district-approved translation service would be, the software, the particular program. So maybe that's what it needs to say.
Okay, so including I think it's really important that we're super clear with
I just
parents.
wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that I was going to add language to modify it.
Ms. Peterson?
Just a clarification on that, the ENL services. Sometimes with translation devices, it's not always a student may not be a technical, it's the law, I have a question on the law. The exemption is for a ENL student, they have to be identified as that. Because sometimes there's students that are not identified as ENL students anymore. You know, like they test out or what have you, so it's only for ENL students.
No, not necessarily.
Okay, I just wanted to make that
No, it's not.
clarification.
That can be removed, but we were trying to delimit it.
Perfect, okay, thank you.
Mr. Bergerelli, then Ms. Burks.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. I'm going to go back to the communication between home and student. And I know this isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but it's something that I had mentioned before in passing. When I was a kid, when most of us were kids, when my mother had to bring me my lunch, she knocked on the front door, walked in the office, said, hey, I got to bring my kid lunch, and she would walk to my classroom. And there's been a disconnection with that because of safety reasons and everything, protecting our students. So parents, you know, they didn't like the Yonder pouch because my kid's a good kid and never had a problem with his phone. How do I talk to my kid? We've been using chat apps for 20-something years. And there's a chat functionality built into the Chromebooks already. And I know there will be complications with kids who are in foster care and don't have, their guardianship isn't as cut and dry, or there's custody issues where maybe you don't want a parent communicating with a kid. It just seems like, though, it's out there and so easy to implement a way to text the office to send the message to the kid or something like that. It just seems like the answer's already there. We just need to maybe talk to some other districts to see how they implement something like that. Or, what's our solution to make parents feel like I need to tell my kid the key is under the mat or something that simple because we grew up a different way. So,
Ms. Peterson?
So here comes that data privacy law. Okay, so Ed Law 2D really restricts what we can and cannot give access to. So though there may be emerging technologies all around us, and to education, we always have to remember technology is moving at a rate that is fast and which you may have access and availability to within the community in your day-to-day life. School districts at times, because of the provisions of privacy and of the provisions of just data security and cybersecurity, cannot always give access to those things. There's also concerns when those features then lead to student management issues. So there has been there's definitely some concerns when those functions were opened, and then Ed Law 2D came and said, no, you can't do that. And I'm sure Mr. McGrath, I know one of the biggest concerns I had as a technology director, and Mr. McGrath can definitely add, was Pinterest, right? So like this site that we think is nothing, but it's a data mine. And our state is making us aware how to protect our student privacy data, because there's sites and places that collect information. You know, we have ease of access, and I'm probably taking Mr. McGrath's, this is because once you have it, you never lose it.
Once you have it, you have it.
Sorry. You know, we are so used to, in our daily lives, hitting automatic sign-in, but when you hit automatic sign-in, it has all of your data on the back end of it, and the state does not want us doing that with student information that parents are not aware of. I don't know if you want to add anything, Mr. McGrath?
No, I think the concern of, is there a way to digitize the process by which parents can communicate to the school, hey, I want to reach out to my child. So I think it's a great conversation. The concern I have with that is, how do we know, so if an administrator or a secretary or somebody, they're running around doing the business of running the school, how does the parent confirm, hey, the message has been received? And so there's a question that I have. If it was a real emergency, I know myself as a parent, if there's a real emergency, I want to know my message is received. A phone message, I spoke to somebody, I know my phone is received. And we thought that gave the most assurances. Sending a text message, it's out there, unless you know, and maybe I didn't see that message that day and it was really important. So that was the concern that we kind of ran into as well, is how do we help the parents know the message has been received and it's been delivered?
Ms. Peterson, then Ms. Burks.
The other thing that, another area that I think is also important, because I'm looking at Margot with letters and communication. As a school district, we're responsible to make sure a parent is a parent and a guardian is a guardian. So sometimes messages can come through. How do I know that? Like, I have to be able to confirm that. We can do that through a phone call. So that's the other thing. So we would definitely have to, we're not opposed to exploring it to see if there's other venues and ways for us to do that. But guardianship and making sure communications is right is one of our most basic responsibilities as a school district. So we also have to ensure that that is also looked into.
Ms. Burks.
You guys mentioned before, when I asked a question about special education students, that we could include it in their IEP. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because my son has IEP and I did not know that, but he doesn't have a cell phone now anyway. But some parents don't know that, so I'm glad that was mentioned. But my question is, because this is going to come up more than once, what about those kids that are in the process of getting an IEP or a 504? That doesn't, just because they're in that process doesn't excuse them from that disability. So their parents and the child still needs to have that line of communication. So that's going to come up more than likely. So that would be my question.
Ms. Peterson.
So I think with the development of the educational and education plan, I think that what that document is a way that a staff member or a teacher or administrator should approach your child in their learning and have an understanding of why those accommodations and modifications are needed. So I think that in the development of that plan, there needs to be discussion around what is the need, right? So you talked about your individual expectation in general for your child, that they as a part of their disability may be anxiety, and what does that mean? How do we accommodate or modify? So that is what that discussion will be, right? So if my child needs access based on their disability to having a pathway, and that pathway needs to be explained, that's something that can be a part of the beginning of the year, like kind of orientation with the IEP teacher, where we kind of talk about with your child, okay, so we're reading, I understand, what does that look like in the classroom? So if, John needs some type of support around when I'm feeling anxious. What are the things that he needs to do? How does he need to communicate? And that's a part of the individual education plan. Okay, so if I'm feeling that way and that's a part of my right as a student, is educating the child how to get that access in a positive way. And also, how do we, with the teacher, give them the parameters of what the expectation is? How do we give okay, I understand, I've heard you, trying to de-escalate, refocus, get them what they need, and then get them back into instruction. Because the goal is that we do not want to create an IEP or a plan within an IEP that takes away from student instruction. We also do not want to have different sets of rules and different accommodations. I'm a special ed teacher. I have 12 students in my class. I can't have everybody with a different way in which we're doing this. So it's something that we're going to have to really work with the special education department around, if this is requested, what are the parameters and how it should be scripted so everyone's clear on what that expectation. But I do think that if I have a child and it's a part of their disability, it's a part of their behavioral management or their BIP, it's something that definitely should be noted, and the pathway from the special education department about how that is done needs to be reviewed.
Any other questions, board members? If not, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
No, we have to go back to executive.
I just want to make sure that I know exactly. Matthew would always at the end say, I want to recap. Okay, so 12:30 is going to be first reading and adoption. That's the public comment policy.
That's correct.
The internet-enabled policy has had a first reading, correct? So this will be a second reading and adoption.
Correct.
And the coaches policy, is that going to be recommended for a first reading?
First reading.
Okay. And I know about the anti-harassment policy. Okay, thank you very much.
Chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of legal advice. Seeking advice from legal counsel.
Second.
Motion? I need a motion first.
Oh, so moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Bergarelli?
Yes.
Mr. Gray? Oh, no. Sorry.
Yes.
Ex officio.
We will not be taking action. Thank you.